closing arguments are underway right now in Amber Guyger's murder trial, and the jury will begin deliberations this afternoon. We want to take you live inside the courtroom where the defense attorney, Toby Shook, is now giving his closing remarks. By the way, we are streaming this live right now on our Facebook page. The jury will consider three options: that Amber Guyger is guilty of murder, that she is guilty of a lesser charge of manslaughter, or that she is not guilty of any crime. At the heart of the case is whether Guyger made reasonable decisions under the mistaken belief that Botham Jean was an intruder inside her apartment. The defense argues it was a tragic mistake and not a crime. The prosecution is trying to convince the jury that Guyger had intent to kill and that nothing she did that night was reasonable.
This has to do with that defendant making unreasonable decisions that put her in that seat and Bo in the ground. That's what this case is about.
Who would not have sympathy for Botham Jean? Wonderful human being. Died in these horrible, tragic circumstances. Who would not have sympathy for his family or anyone in that position? Everyone does. But that is not part of your consideration as a jury.
The defense has built its case around a term called mistake of fact, that Guyger made reasonable decisions based on what she thought were facts at the time. Fox 4's Sean Rabb joining us now with a closer look at how that term applies to the jury instructions.
Yeah, and good afternoon to you, Steve. And let me just tell you, the state strongly objected to this theory, this idea of the piece of law referring to mistake of fact being included in the jury charge. They objected. It was overruled. It is going to be a big part of jury deliberations. Now, before the jurors were brought back into the courtroom for closing statements, the attorneys grappled over every word in what's called the jury charge. The jury charge is a document that tells jurors what they can and cannot consider as they deliberate. It kind of guides them in their deliberations. Prosecutor Doug Gladden argued for the state against mistake of fact being included in that jury charge. Here's why. Let's listen.
The charge doesn't apply mistake of fact to the justification of self-defense. It instructs the jury, if you find that she was mistaken, that she was reasonably mistaken about where she was, you will acquit her. It eliminates her legal culpability for an intentional killing based on her mistake about the circumstances. And Judge, that's just not the law, and the state objects to that charge.
Mistake of fact, Your Honor, obviously has to apply. It only makes sense that it applies if Ms. Guyger was mistaken in her belief, not only whether she was at the right apartment or not, but whether there was an actual intruder in what she thought was her apartment.
Judge Tammy Kemp overruled the state's objection, saying the court is going to leave it to the jury to decide as the trier of fact as to whether or not the mistaken belief was reasonable. Again, the closing statements underway. Both sides will get an hour total time, and they break that up in different segments. This is more than just a summation of the last 6 days of testimony. Closing statements is the last chance for both sides to make their last pitch to this jury through both emotional and factual appeal, reminding jurors of small pieces of facts that may have forgotten, may have been overlooked. Toby Shook, for his part, is trying to take the emotion out of this now. He's telling these jurors, consider emotion, push that aside. Only the facts. Nothing else matters except what happened at that door. Jason Fine, who opened up with closing statements for the state of Texas in this case, and he was appealing to the emotion of these jurors, talking about the good man, Botham Jean, and how this happened and what a tragedy, and that murder was committed. Again, both sides will have an hour. Then they'll begin deliberating. For the first time, Steve, these jurors will talk to each other about what they have seen and heard over the last 6 days.